On the evening of October the 31st, 1974, the Halloween spirit had well and truly hit Texas, with hundreds of young trick-or-treaters venturing out into the streets of Deer Park. Among them was Ronald Clark O'Brien, who accompanied his two children, 8-year-old Timothy and 5-year-old Elizabeth, as they embarked on their Halloween trick-or-treat adventure. With Ronald was his friend and neighbour Jim Bates and his son. Every year, 8-year-old Timothy looked forward to Halloween, just like any other kid does, and that year was no different. When the day finally came, he dressed up in his Planet of the Apes costume and eagerly walked the streets of Deer Park looking for candy. Later that night, he was dead, and his story would forever haunt the residents of Deer Park. But what happened to him? This is a story of Halloween's most infamous murder case. It was Halloween night, and the group consisting of Ronald, Timothy, Elizabeth, Jim, and Jim's son were now around 15 minutes into their night. Everything seemed perfectly normal, until the children came up to a house with no lights on. They decided to knock on anyway, to chance if there was someone inside, but there wasn't, so all of the children and Jim Bates moved on, but Ronald stuck around. He was now left alone. The kids and Jim were now ahead when Ronald ran behind them to catch them up. In his hand were 5 pixie sticks. Pixie sticks are a sherbet-filled straw. Ronald claimed that when the children left, the house with no lights opened the door. He then received the pixie sticks from the house. Ronald gave one to each of the children, and also a 10-year-old neighbourhood child that Ronald knew from church, who they saw trick-or-treating. The group then carried on for a few more minutes, before calling it a night and heading home, due to heavy rain. They had only walked up 2 streets. After a short but fun night, the children were ready for bed. Ronald told Timothy and Elizabeth that they were allowed to have 1 sweet from their collection each before bed. Apparently Elizabeth chose first, a standard piece of candy, and then Timothy chose. He chose the pixie stick. Timothy tried to suck the powder through the tube, but it was clumped together. Ronald saw this and helped loosen the powder. Timothy then ate the powder but straight away complained that it tasted horrible and bitter. Then within a few minutes, he began violently vomiting and shaking on the floor, which prompted Ronald and Daneen, his mother, to call 911. Ronald held Timothy in his arms while he violently threw up and went limp in his arms. Tragically, within an hour of first eating the candy, Timothy was dead. He died in the back of the ambulance en route to the hospital. It didn't take long for the news of Timothy's death to spread around the town, and that same night and the following morning, the Deer Park community took the sweets off of their children and handed them into the police, fearing that the candy could have been laced with poison. At first, Ronald wasn't a suspect, but the coroner had suspicions. Dr. Joseph, chief medical examiner of Harris County, said, "I told him the situation, and he asked what the young man's breath smelled like. It's cyanide." And he was right. The autopsy revealed that the candy was laced with potassium cyanide, enough to kill 2 fully grown adults. The sticks had been opened, filled with cyanide, and then resealed. Thankfully, none of the other children had eaten theirs, although one child attempted to, but could not open the stick. An investigation was launched. Obviously, with any case like this, the first person they talked to was the parents. Police wanted to figure out where the candy came from, so that they could trace it back. Almost straight away, the police were suspicious of Ronald. They asked him where he had gotten the pixie sticks from, but he said he could not remember. Meanwhile, other police were interviewing people who lived on the 2 streets that they walked up. Not a single one of them had given out pixie sticks. This led the police to walk up the 2 streets with Ronald so that he could point out the house with no lights, which is where he claimed to have gotten the candy from. After walking up and down the road multiple times, Ronald finally stopped outside the house that he claimed to have gotten the candy from. He then claimed he never actually saw the man, just his arms as he handed out the candy. Again, the police did not believe him. His story fell apart even more when the police interviewed the man who owned the house. The owner of the house was Courtney Melvin, who worked in the air traffic control team at William P. Hobby Airport. Courtney worked late shifts, meaning he often didn't get home until midnight, hence his lights being out. The police ruled him out of being a suspect when over 200 people at the airport confirmed he had been in work that night. After this, the police were almost certain that Ronald was lying and that he was guilty. The police then decided to look into Ronald's personal life and found out he was massively in debt by over $100,000, which today is the equivalent of over $500,000. Ronald was unable to hold a job for a long period of time, having over 20 in 10 years, and perhaps the most shocking, he had acquired life insurance on the children, totaling around $60,000, but none for himself or his wife. His wife also had no idea that he'd done this. He had then proceeded to contact the insurance company the day after Timothy had died. The final nail in the coffin was a shopkeeper coming forward who would claim that Ronald had inquired about buying cyanide at his shop. He never did, and they never found out where he bought the cyanide, but the evidence was now too blatant to ignore. Although he maintained his innocence, the police believed that they had a solid motive. Ronald was going to kill both of his children for the life insurance policy, and the neighbourhood children to cover it up. Upon obtaining a warrant, investigators discovered scissors at the O'Brien residence with cyanide matching plastic residue, and just 5 days after Timothy was murdered, Ronald was arrested on the 5th of November, 1974. He was charged with 1 count of capital murder and 4 counts of attempted murder, but he still maintained his innocence. His trial began on May the 5th, 1975, and included testimony from a chemist, a chemical supply salesman, friends, and co-workers, all whom cited his unusual interest in cyanide. Ronald's sister-in-law and brother-in-law testified about his unsettling discussions after Timothy's funeral, where he talked about using insurance money for a vacation and other purchases. What makes his story even more disturbing is the fact that Timothy didn't even choose the pixie stick. Ronald's wife said that he told Timothy it was the only sweet he was allowed that night. Despite him still maintaining innocence after all the evidence, on June the 3rd, 1975, a jury convicted him of capital murder and 4 counts of attempted murder, sentencing him to death. Ronald was dubbed as the man who killed Halloween and the Candyman by the media. Jimmy Bates, the neighbour who went with him that night, said, "Here is a man who killed a trusting, defenceless, innocent 8-year-old kid for one reason, dollars and cents. He was willing at random to pick some other kids that other people loved and kill them too." Ronald was sent to prison near Huntsville, Texas. It was reported that he was absolutely hated by the other prisoners and friendless. Despite everything, one of the detectives on the case stated, "O'Brien adored the attention. I think he even loved it during his trial." Despite various appeals, on March the 31st, 1984, Ronald was executed via lethal injection. His execution drew a massive crowd, who mocked him shouting "trick or treat." His final words were, "What is about to transpire in a few moments is wrong. However, we as humans do make mistakes and errors. This execution is one of those wrongs, yet doesn't mean our whole system of justice is wrong. Therefore, I would forgive all who have taken part in any way in my death. Also to anyone I have offended in any way during my 39 years. I pray and ask for your forgiveness, just as I forgive anyone who offended me in any way. And I pray and ask for God's forgiveness for us all respectively as human beings. To my loved ones, I extend my undying love. To those close to me, know in your hearts I love you one and all. God bless you all, and may God have best blessings to be always yours." He said no words about Timothy, or showed any remorse for what he did. He was laid to rest in Forest Park East Cemetery in Webster, Texas, and this case would forever be Halloween's most infamous murder. Let me know what you think about this case in the comments below. This is not an AI channel, I do all of this myself, the research, writing, editing, thumbnails, etc, and I upload every Thursday. So if you enjoy my work, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.